So thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Michelle. I'm the Math Success Coach here at Mangahigh. So it is my job to make sure that you who do have access to Mangahigh, you are actually using it beneficially, and especially want to focus today on the analytics, the data that is available on Mangahigh, so that you can use that data pieces or the information to help you understand which of your students are ready to progress with the work that you have assigned them, and which students you kind of want to say, look, let's sort of check out of the live session for briefly and actually have some one-on-one time to help them understand and progress through. Okay, so there is a lot of data pieces or information that we will be sharing today, but to begin with, I want to kind of backtrack something a little bit, which is understanding the types of achievements that your students can get on Mangahigh. So as you know, there are two different types of activities, the Prodigy Activities as well as game activities. So the Prodigy Activities is a learning quiz which progressively get harder. So everyone starts at the easy level questions, but they progressively get towards the medium, the hard, then the extreme level questions. The reason why I want to start with this is because if you understand how your students achieve a bronze, a silver, or a gold medal, then you can also understand the types of questions they can or can't do based on the medals that they have achieved. So we on Mangahigh, we don't actually give them a sort of a numerical score because that's on a very linear scale. It's really more about saying, okay, have you achieved the minimum learning objective or the minimum standard, and have you then tried to sort of pursue it a little bit further and actually try and challenge yourself towards, 6 months progression or an additional year progress and so forth. So to begin with, if you are looking in your reports and your students are showing that they have not achieved a medal, what that's actually telling us is that they can't even do the easy or medium questions. So the medium questions, so a student's typical no medal journey would look like this. They might be able to do the easy questions. They then go into a medium questions, couldn't quite handle the medium questions and pop back down to easy again. And there might be even some easy questions that they can't do. So if you are addressing your students that are struggling with passing, or struggling with actually earning a bronze medal, then I would probably start by focusing on the easy and medium questions and actually making sure that they understand that. Later on, we will also discuss a little bit more about if you need to, you can move your students into subgroups where some of your students in your class might be working at a lower level, or perhaps even group your students into the higher ending group as well. So we can use these medal achievements to help you identify which students you can put into the relevant groups. But for now, the next level or the first medal level for your students achieve is a bronze medal. So what that indicates to you is students are quite comfortable with the easy level questions, they're quite comfortable with the medium level questions, they've managed to pop into hard, and they are getting to start feeling really good about the hard questions. So if you are looking at a student who have achieved a bronze medal, what that's telling you is that they are able to do the hard questions but couldn't quite handle the extreme questions. So if this is a particular student that you want to push forward, then when you are addressing some one-on-one time with this particular student, I'd be focusing on the extreme level questions because we know that's where they are struggling. Okay, so that's a bronze level student. And then you have your silver level students who are, managing the hard questions quite well, have really started to tap into the extreme level questions, are showing good signs that they are doing the extreme questions quite comfortably. So that's how they have managed to medal a silver medal standard. And of course, lastly, these are students who have really pushed the boundaries and have managed to get all 10 extreme questions correctly. Okay, now in understanding these medal system, what you then do is if you have students who are working at a bronze level, that they are struggling with the extreme level questions. So that's the level that you want to pop into and work with them. All right, so what does this actually look like from a teacher's reporting point of view? So the first thing you see from a teacher's point of view is, of course, you would go in and select your class. And by the way, if you are the administrator for your school, you can look at data for the entire school. On the top left-hand corner, instead of selecting individual classes, you'd want to pop in and select the entire school name. And that way, all of this data will be re-aggregated to show you how your school overall is progressing. And as the administrator, you can pop into the individual classes and identify which of your students are doing really well and which are, and which of your class are really struggling with using Mangahigh. You can also look at, reflect on time periods. So in other words, this is report that you can, well, at the moment we're looking at the report based on this academic year, but you can also look at, say, this month's worth of work or this week's worth of work. So really drill into if your students or if your school is actually using Mangahigh effectively. As a teacher, though, you can start by selecting the school or the class name that you are working with. And the first report you get to see is the class assignments report. Okay, with the class assignments report, what we are looking at is how your students are progressing towards completion of the activities you have assigned for them. So if you had assigned any future activities, it would not have popped up in your students' to-do list yet, but you'd be able to access them through the future assignments tab. But if we're looking at the current assignments tab, what we are looking at is, for example, if I click into measure time, I can firstly see quite a number of students who have passed as well as quite a number of students who have not passed. Okay, so at this point, we'll scroll down and we'll look at, all right, so it looks like Tashi's doing really well, has made 4 attempts and managed to get a gold medal. That's fantastic. Melissa has made 2 attempts and managed a silver medal. That's great. I'd probably say to Melissa, hey, give it another go and see if, you can achieve it. Now that we're looking at some live data, what you will see is that screen has just flicked because obviously these students are actually, working through Mangahigh at the same time as well. Okay. Other things you can also look at is then students who are struggling. So you'll look at Hazel Kurt here that says, look, that's really great effort. 5 attempts in order to get a bronze medal. So I'd probably be watching Hazel and sort of keeping Hazel in the back of my mind and see if she is, struggling with any other activities. But then you see Chris and Charlotte, who has made 1 attempt in order to get a bronze medal. Now, at this point, what you would say is, right, we want our students to attempt each task at least 3 times. The reason why we do that is because on Mangahigh, as you know, activities are adaptive, so questions progressively get harder. So we do want to push our students towards that harder extreme level questions if they are capable of doing that. So if we attempt each task at least 3 times, what we're exposing our students to is 30 questions as a minimum. And of course, they can do a 4th or a 5th attempt as well. Okay, but for a student who has only made 1 attempt, they've only really done 10 questions. And the fact that they've made 1 attempt and managed to get a bronze medal, what that tells me is that if they had given it a 2nd or a 3rd attempt, they are very likely to get a silver or even a gold medal. So I'd probably say to Chris and Charlotte in this particular case that they haven't really quite achieved their true potential. So maybe really encourage them to, give the activity a 2nd or a 3rd go. All right. Tracy, on the other hand, here's a student that I'd be really concerned with. Tracy and Zhaoji here, who has both made, more than 3 attempts and still have not managed to get a medal. So at this point, you probably would want to start looking at perhaps, is this a trend that is going on with this student? So you can click into the student's name and look at other activities that this student has possibly done. All right, so clicking into Tracy's name, I've noticed that Tracy has only spent 39 minutes on Mangahigh so far. She's attempted 2 activities and both activities she has not passed. Here's an activity that she has only attempted once, back on the 6th of March. So I'll probably be questioning, what Tracy's been up to and whether or not there's anything that you can do to support her growth in Mangahigh as well, or her growth in maths in general, both from a time spent point of view and of course the assignments pass rate point of view. You can go ahead and reassign that task to that particular student, but what I would suggest in this case is, look, you can say, in this case you want to reassign that task. Let me have a look. All right. So so when you do go ahead and have your class and actually go and reassign that task, you can select individual students' names that you want to reassign that task to. So let me show you how to do that. So if we are back in the assignments view, getting out of Tracy's report, if I'm back into the assignments view, I can go ahead and reassign that task and say, right, I just want to assign that task to students who never passed. So the never passed list includes students who have attempted it before but never passed, or students who have never attempted it before and therefore never passed. All right, once you're happy with that selection, just click done, and that way that activity will be assigned back to that student as well. Now, if you are noticing Tracy is struggling with a lot of her activities, then what we could also do is actually place Tracy into a different subgroups. And the way you would do that is you'd go into admin and go ahead and create a brand new class that could be Tracy's sort of a modified class group. And then once you're happy with that selection, what you do is go ahead and find Tracy and move Tracy into that modified class that you have selected for her. And that way, the next time you go ahead and assign a task for Tracy, you don't need to assign that into 3KB. You might be assigning it into that modified group that you've created just for these students who are perhaps the students who are struggling a little bit. Now, keeping in mind your students can't actually tell if they have been sort of reassigned into different groups, because as far as the students is concerned, it's really about, you know, the work, the skill, learning about learning the skills rather than, you know, what curriculum level it belongs to. Okay. So other things you can look at from a teacher's point of view is, of course, your assignments, curriculum, and achievements report. I wanted to point out two major things. So with all of these reports that we're looking at, we can drill into, you know, specific time periods. So of course, when you are remote learning or teaching, you could start looking at perhaps, you know, how much work your students are doing on a weekly basis. And you will start seeing that as part of remote teaching, you will want to start assigning, you know, activities on Mangahigh regularly. So in the past, when you had classroom time, you might be really overwhelmed with a lot of different activities or different content that you need to go through. And Mangahigh may have been used as that sort of ad hoc, you know, once every couple of weeks activity. Whereas with remote learning, you will start seeing most schools are starting to assign activities more regularly, so there is a schedule around, you know, the work that you're assigning for your students. So as a result, these data points will start growing. So it'd be really useful for you to start looking at data just based on a particular week or a particular month. That will help you, you know, really just hone in on just particular weeks of studies that you're doing with your students. So the assignments report shows you how your students have progressed against the activities you've assigned them. And then the curriculum report shows you how your students are progressing towards the completion of the curriculum that you have assigned for this particular class. So what that means, or what that's showing me at the moment, is that there are 3,350 activities altogether. And of course, that's, you know, all 3,000 activities across the 25 students that is in your class. And you can break that down later on. And I'll show you how your students view this data on their own page as well. But if you look into the assignments, we want to start doing things like downloading reports of your students' progress and really hone into other activities that they can or can't do. So all I've done so far is I've clicked into the assignments report, click on show grid view so I can see the view as a whole class across all of the activities that your students have been working on within that time frame that you've selected. All right. So if, say, for example, I want to look into more detail on how your students are progressing on measure time, you can click vertically or horizontally, in this case, diagonally. Let me correct myself. Diagonally, in this case, the activity title, and it will bring you more detail or similar detail to what you saw earlier. So again, you can click here and actually click into individual students reports as well. So there's a lot of actions you can take to hone into individual students' progress. If you do want to look at individual students directly by clicking into the students' names, you can do that as well. And again, it takes you to the activities that they have completed and how well they progressed in that particular activity. All right. All of this information you can download into an Excel format, or if you wanted to, so also send a certificate for your student based on the work that they've done. All right. Of course, you'll need to digitally put your signature there, but and again, this report or this certificate will actually be aggregated based on the time frame that you've selected as well for you to be viewing. Okay. So there are a lot of other things you can do on the reporting, but what I do want to show you is, from a measuring progress point of view, you can look at, you know, the timeframes, or you can also download the Excel document. Now, keeping in mind the Excel is obviously a you know, a data point at one particular point in time. So I probably won't be downloading Excel just for every single activity that you've completed, but perhaps download an Excel from a summative point of view, so perhaps once a week, so that you can compare week 2 with week 1 or week 4 with week 1 and so forth. All right. So from an Excel point of view, it is the same pieces of information that you are looking at on the screen. The only difference is sorry, I shouldn't say that the only difference. Of course, you're looking at it from a Excel point of view, but what you are noticing here is there's obviously students who have, or Xing Can in this case, for example, have achieved a bronze and silver medal. So this is the same data that you are seeing on the live screen as well. But then you have this situation where you have students who have not achieved a medal. Okay, so this indicates students who have attempted the task but not achieved a medal. But then here, these are students who have not even achieved or not passed because they haven't even attempted it at all. Then you have this interesting situation where your Elizabeth, in this case, has not attempted the task before the due date, but after the due date has decided to go ahead and do the work and achieved a bronze medal as a result of it. Okay, so you are able to actually track your students' progress after the due date as well. Now, as I mentioned, you can look at individual students' results, and sometimes you might want to actually share some reports with their parents as well. So what you could do is actually click onto the student's name, and now you can see the student's progress based on that, for that individual student. And again, re-aggregate that based on the time frame that you've selected, and on the right-hand corner. So if you click on your mouse, you can actually save this information as a PDF, so you can email it to the relevant parents as well. So that's another thing you can do from a parent's point of view. They might want to keep track of how their students are going or how their child is going from in terms of how they're progressing on Mangahigh, so you can definitely do that. All right. Now what I want to do is actually show you how your students view and track their own progress, because this is particularly important during remote learning and teaching, because we do have this expectation that students will sort of up their game a little bit in terms of taking more ownership of their own learning. And that can only really happen if you are providing them with the tools that will allow them to do that. So I want to show you how your students actually track their own progress. So as a teacher, or as a student, I should say, they log into their Mangahigh account. All right, so what they see is obviously a list of activities that you have assigned for them. They can see if they've earned themselves a gold or a bronze medal, or they've made multiple attempts and not achieved a medal. Students can see, activities that's been recommended to them. So these are activities that sort of natural next step for them. So that these activities are essentially a personalized learning pathway for each student. So it's really important that they prioritize the assigned activities, but also think of the recommended activities as that support network for them to work on, so that they're not doing, moving on to activities that are either too easy or too hard for your students. All right. So when they click on their name, they can see how many medals they've earned. So from a gamification point of view, yep, that keeps it interesting for the kids. But from a really informative classroom progress point of view, you want your students to click on progress. And this is where, remember that data that you saw as a teacher around assignments, curriculum progression and achievements and so forth. Your students can see exactly the same pieces of information just for them. Okay, so they can also click on this academic year or change the time frame. And so you want to start getting our students to start tracking how much time they spend on Mangahigh as well. So I generally recommend spending about 45 minutes on Mangahigh per week. That said, we have students who spend 8 or 10 hours on Mangahigh, about an hour and a half or a couple of hours a day. So it really depends on how much screen time they're allowed to have. And hopefully with this screen time, they're actually, having productive screen time rather than just, playing some random games that aren't necessarily related to the curriculum. So a couple of things your students can do from here. So in this particular case, the student can see that they have been assigned 33 activities, 17 of which I have completed. Click into it so I can see what activity it is that I have completed. All right, so 52% completion rate. So as a student, a lot of students are quite, obsessed about metrics these days. So this will give them a bit of an incentive or a goal as well to try and drive their metric towards that 100% point as well, or mark. So they can see activities that they've completed. They can also see activities that they have attempted, all right, but have not passed. So they can go ahead and click on the activity and give it another go until they pass. They can also see when the activity is due. So it's really nice for your students to kind of have an end date. So when you are assigning activities, we do encourage you to, especially from a remote learning point of view, don't stretch out the end date too much. You really want your students to be thinking about, all right, well, if today is the day that we're assigning the activity or working through this activity, can I get you to complete it in 3 days? All right, so have a really short and sweet finish date so that you can keep your kids on track moving forward as well. And of course, that will also show up in your data so you can start identifying which students are ready to move forward and which students you need to sort of keep working with as well. All right. And they can also see other activities that they have not attempted. Again, same process. Go ahead and click play to play the activity. The other thing also to notice is that your students can continue to play activities even after the due date. That's actually quite deliberate because we don't necessarily want students to be bound necessarily by the due date. I know that sort of contradicts what I've just said, but basically the idea is, yes, the item is still there. Yes, they can continue to complete it and work through it. But from a teaching point of view, you want to remind your students that in order for the results to count, they need to complete it before the due date. All right. So again, go ahead and click play and start that activity. Now, from a curriculum progress point of view, this is where it becomes really important that you as a teacher, you are assigning them at the appropriate curriculum level for as far as you're aware. And of course, you can move students between, one curriculum level or another based on the subgroups that you have created. And so basically within this particular case, if this class that Michelle belongs to has been assigned the Year 3 curriculum, then there are 93 activities that Michelle will need to complete in order to get 100%. All right. So this is where your students' independent studies become really important because they are no longer doing work that's way too easy for them or even work that's way too hard for them. But hopefully they are working through activities that is, at the appropriate curriculum level that they should be able to move into. And of course with Mangahigh, because all the questions are sort of progressively stepped out from easy through to medium, through to hard, through to extreme, we do encourage our students to make sure that they, get themselves through it. If there is a Teach Me component, try and use the Teach Me component. So think of it as kind of like a flipped classroom model that we're trying to use. Especially during that remote learning phase. So hopefully you was going to start encouraging our students to be able to help themselves through the platform or through the tasks as well. Now I'm just going to quickly pop into this help document that I started showing you guys earlier. So remember, as a teacher, as a student, they see a bit of a journey as to how they went when they completed it. Now, completed a particular task on this summary screen. So it's really important that as a teacher, you remind your students especially as part of their independent learning, you want them to start using their mistakes to help them grow. So make sure that they click on these red boxes. That takes them through to, the question that they got wrong. They have an opportunity to then click on Show Solution. Okay, and with that solution, they learn from it and it actually helps them get up to the harder level questions. So rather than, just putting your hand up and ask the teacher, I can't do this, really giving our students resources to help themselves, I suppose, through this whole process of remote learning. And the other thing we would encourage students to do as well is do a reflection sheet, especially when they're doing Prodigy activities. So on here, this is a page called support.mangahigh.com. It has a lot of resources that you can use, including any information around distance learning teaching strategies. So there's a lot of resources in here that you can access. Success. I'll send a link through later on as well. But basically, if I look up reflection sheets, for example, you can find a document that's called Student Reflection Sheets. With Prodigy Reflections, what we do is we get our students to start by thinking about what their learning intention is for this activity. And quite often the activity itself, if I pull up an activity on Mangahigh, bear with me, say for example, measure time. All right, students can get a sense of, okay, well, what is it that you think you're about to learn? So quite often the activity itself, the students can see, right, you know, that's the activity or that's the topic that they are going to be addressing, or the learning objective. But if they want to look at it in more detail, so I've now just popped into a students page. When your students log into Mangahigh and bring up an activity, and if I click play, all right, that should give them more information about what they're about to do and what it's about. All right, so solve problems by estimating. Today is what we're doing, and I know it varies from one activity to another. Here we go, factorize using a common term. Here's what we're about to be covering today. So there are some activities that have more information than others as far as that sort of learning objective is concerned, but it's really good for the teachers to encourage students to actually start reflecting on, all right, what is it that we're about to learn today, rather than just kind of going in because I have to. So as a student with the this reflection sheet, now we don't necessarily get every single student to do it, but it does become important, especially with students who, as you noticed with Tracy earlier, it's a student who is giving it a good go but still haven't been very successful. So get Tracy to write down the learning intentions. You know, understand, you know, what is your goal today. So understand what you need to do in order to get a bronze, silver or gold medal. Okay, so maybe just get Tracy to circle, right, okay, I'm aiming for a bronze medal today. And while they're reviewing, or while Tracy is reviewing those, the red boxes, write down on the left-hand side, copy down the question and show how to solve the problem. So the student can actually click on show solution to get an idea of how to solve the question. All right. But on the right hand side, also get our students to think about, why did they get the question wrong? This is really, really powerful moment for them, because sometimes it is just a simple mistake, like I misread the question, I forgot to add but I subtracted instead, or I didn't move the decimal places the correct way. It could be something as innocent as that, or it could be a really big learning moment that they have discovered just by going through the new solutions or checking the solutions. But it's really powerful for them to actually write this down, because that really helps with their memory formation and really affirms for them next time that they won't actually make that same mistake again. But more importantly, having this reflection sheet, the other benefit of that also is when they are going through these activities, the next time they start, if we had finished at medium, it will start you back at medium. But chances are the questions that you couldn't answer the previous round, that's going to be captured in your reflection sheet. So that will help you then eventually move up to that hard or extreme question as well. All right. So I really love the reflection sheet, and I think it's really important that especially the students who are struggling to actually include that or add that as part of your as part of their learning strategies as well, so that they can start taking ownership of their own learning. Now, with this support.mangahigh.com page, there is also a section called Distance Learning Strategies. So depending on how much screen time you have with your students, I know this varies from one school to another. So you can use Mangahigh differently depending on how much time, or how, you know, whether or not you're doing it live with your students. So as a tune-in activity, you can click into the 15 minutes reflection learning strategy, or perhaps even if you're just setting it as a homework task, you can use that as method, like I explained, as a flipped classroom method as well. Okay, so but ultimately I think the message with remote learning really is giving your students more control and actually resourcing them with the tools so that they can feel like they are achieving, not just from a results point of view, but from a process point of view. So, you know, remember, students can click into the assigned task to look through the assigned activities, and importantly, really importantly, really encourage our students to do the recommended activities, because these are activities that is ultimately going to help them you know, identify what else, you know, the work that they need to do, or any prerequisite tasks that they need to do in order to be able to complete perhaps even the assigned work as well. Now, ultimately, as a teacher, you can assign tasks, but students do have the ability to go through and access the contents from foundations all the way through to, the extension work as well. So in this particular case, I'm looking at the Mangahigh Universal Curriculum, but this browse activities will reflect the curriculum that you have selected for your school. So it could be the Australian curriculum, the New South Wales Board of Studies curriculum, and the structure here will follow the same. All right. So as a teacher, of course, you can assign games, all right? But if your students are accessing games through the Game Centre, the difference here is they are accessing the games from the start to the finish. Whereas each of these games have different levels and each of the levels are mapped to the curriculum. So as a teacher, you are encouraged to assign a game activity. I generally recommend assigning 2 or 3 Prodigy activities per week and perhaps 1 supporting game activity per week. So that way your students are also working on games that is relevant to the work that you're doing in class. Okay, and of course we've had a look at some leaderboards and progress. The last thing I wanted to look at is supporting your students. So as a teacher, you can actually send messages to your students, whether it be after you've reviewed the reports or perhaps before you've started the activity, just as a sense of encouragement. So it's really nice from a teacher, from a student, from a student's point of view, they are getting sort of encouraging messages from their teachers, and you can do it quite easily through Mangahigh. And I'll just show you quickly how you would do that. So as a teacher, you'll see a little inbox. And from the inbox, simply go create a message, select the class that you want to send a message to, and from here you can either select individual students, obviously there's not enough students in there, or select individual students, click tick, go ahead and type in your message down the bottom, right down the bottom, and then click send. Okay, and then that message will actually pop up on your student's page as being a message that's been sent by the teacher for them. So the only other thing I wanted to cover also is, of course, or to wrap up for you, is when a students receive a message, they simply click into it and actually hit reply. So as a teacher, you can respond or send a message to your entire class, but as a student, they can only send messages back to you. Okay, so this whole social environment will really help your students, stay connected and stay social as well while they're away from the main class. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. What I'm going to do is I've recorded this session, so I will actually send through a link to this recording so you can share that with your staff. The last final comments that I would probably make is, make sure you use the reporting to help you identify which of your students are, obviously ready to progress and which students you need to start putting into perhaps a lower level or a higher level. There is a document on support.mangahigh.com, which is our knowledge-based system, where it teaches you how to create subgroups or move students between classes. Okay, if you need anything, please do let us know, but otherwise please keep safe and have fun with remote teaching. Thanks so much, guys.